Welcome back to the channel. This is Crazy Horse. What's really going on with this banking crisis? Let's take a look at it. Today I have a Davidoff cigar from Switzerland in honor of the former Credit Suisse. What's really going on here? This is not a normal run of bank failures. First of all, you had Silicon Valley Bank fail over a weekend after all the officers of the bank sold their stock in it. And as I mentioned in my last video, a couple of choice Israeli banks were able to pull about $1 billion of funds out of SVB the day before it was taken over by regulators, the day before it crashed. Here you have the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, Greg Becker, who also sits on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. So it's not like he doesn't know what he's doing, and it's not like he didn't know what was going on ahead of time, and it's not like the Federal Reserve didn't know what was going on ahead of time. He knew they were underwater on their treasury bonds, obviously didn't have enough cash to pay back their depositors, anywhere near enough, and they were just about to announce, I think it was a $1.4 billion write-off. While they were preparing to do that, all the executives at SVB sold off $84 million in stock over the previous 2 years. They had filed with the SEC a plan to sell off their stock, but they're selling off their stock at like $560 a share, knowing that they're having problems. So the CEO, Greg Becker, sold off nearly $30 million of shares over the past 2 years, including $3.6 million a week before the bank failed, a week before the disclosure that triggered the bank to failure. So he knew that was coming. Here's a nice one. Here's a kicker. Executives at SVB all took their annual bonuses on Friday, the day before the bank was taken over by regulators. If this isn't some kind of weird inside job, I don't know what is. SVB all happened over a weekend. Bank failed on a Friday. Over the weekend, the FDIC and Joe Biden announced they were going to back all depositors. And then the UK branch of SVB was bought out for $1, £1, £1 by HSBC, all over a weekend. No need for regulators to step in and review it. No worries about the paperwork. Just went in and bought it for $1. So then you have Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse failed the next weekend. And just like SVB, it failed on a Friday, and over a weekend, UBS steps in and buys it out for $3.25 billion US dollars, which turned out to be less than 60% of what the shares were trading for on the previous day. So the shareholders of Credit Suisse basically got wiped out. So they got paid 0.76 Swiss francs per share for what was on the day before, 24 hours earlier, trading at 1.86 Swiss francs. The idea was they were supposed to support the shareholders and take care of all the bondholders, et cetera, but they also announced there was going to be a write-off of $17 billion worth of Tier 1 bonds, meaning those were now worthless. So if you're a holder of those T1 bonds, if you're a bank, if you're an investment fund, a pension plan, an insurance company, whoever holds those Tier 1 bonds at Credit Suisse, $17 billion gone, right? So if you're a shareholder of the bank, you got about 40% of what your shares were worth when they sold it to UBS. And if you're a bondholder, gone, $17 billion gone. So I thought bonds were supposed to be the safe haven, right? Everybody buys bonds when the stock market's crashing and the banks are overextended and they have no money on reserves. It's supposed to be the safe place to put your money. $17 billion gone in one click of a button. So if you're a bondholder in Credit Suisse, you lost all your money. And it's probably going to affect a lot of pension funds and a lot of other banks, et cetera. So who's going to be paying for that? All the taxpayers. Wherever the taxpayers are that held those bonds, in those treasury bonds, it's basically like a bailout. So you're now going to be paying for those because inflation's going to go up, your pension's gone, etc. So there's something going on here. This is not just a bank failure. $17 billion of creditor owed money by the bank in bonds wiped out overnight. And 60% of your value in the shares in the bank wiped out overnight. So something's going on. This is not a normal string of just bank failures. As I mentioned in my last video, this is some kind of controlled demolition. The bigger banks eating up the smaller banks. They're telling you take your money out of smaller banks, but the bigger banks are okay. Credit Suisse was the second largest bank in Switzerland. And, you know, we all know Swiss banks are safe, and T-bonds at Swiss banks are safe. So what's going on? You tell me. This is Crazy Horse. Thanks for listening.